Do any of them contain contemporary, first-hand, unbiased accounts of the actual resurrection?
A contemporary, unbiased accounts of the resurrection. First off, that's not even. Oh, actually, I'm not going to dodge your question. I don't think so, based on those criteria.
Right.
But a more important question is, why do you need that? I understand you said that these
would be the best sources.
Right, but it would be a fallacy to say that just because you don't have the best sources doesn't mean your sources aren't good enough.
Oh, no, that's not a fallacy. It is entirely possible for you to say these sources aren't good enough because they're not the best sources. What we can't say is that we could not say that because we don't have good sources, the story is false. We couldn't do that. That would be a fallacy. But I'm entirely within the realm of my rights, and so is anyone else with regard to reason, to say these are not the most reliable sources, and the sources that we have are not reliable enough to establish this as a reliable fact.
No testimony at all is good enough to warrant belief that a person really died and came back to life. The second-hand testimony of the New Testament is certainly not good enough.
So those are two different claims. And just to make sure I'm understanding you, when we say we don't have the best sources, you are kind of going through Ehrman's list here. You know, with the contemporaries, there are people who with no bias, which by the way hardly
Ehrman's list.
Which hardly, so I guess the first point is, if you go through this list, you're going to have to chuck 99% of history.
99% of history does not consist of miraculous claims. Such claims warrant the greatest possible scrutiny, and no documentary evidence alone can withstand such scrutiny.
For the various miraculous accounts from other religions and folklore, what would it take to convince you that those were true?
I think what I'd want to see is an account of something that I can't have an easy naturalistic explanation for.
So are you saying that if you don't have an easy naturalistic explanation, you're justified or willing to just jump to supernatural explanation?
No, it's more complex than that. There's, I'm a Bayesian about this, so it's going to take into account things like prior probability.
Yeah,
but
what's the prior probability of the supernatural?
And that's the biggest problem with Bayesian arguments for the occurrence of miracles. Apologists who use Bayes' theorem say that you can't just look at the intrinsic probability of the occurrence of a miracle. You have to calculate the probability of that miracle's occurrence given a certain set of evidence. The problem is that you still need to know what the intrinsic probability of the occurrence of a miracle is in order to do that calculation. How do you calculate the intrinsic probability of a miracle occurring? Without that figure, a Bayesian equation which mitigates its unlikelihood won't help the apologist. What reason do we have to believe that a miracle is more probable than a lie?
How do we know that they weren't lying? That case was built on how they lived their life and how they were transformed, which we do have historical evidence for.
So if somebody lived their life in an honest way, you can tell that they're not lying about this other thing.
People tend not to die for what they know is a lie.
This is a very common argument that is predicated on what seems to be an entirely baseless premise. As Bart Ehrman said in his debate with William Lane Craig, I hear that claim a lot, but having read every Christian source from the first 500 years of Christianity, I'd like Craig to tell us what the piece of evidence is that the disciples died for their belief in the resurrection. I actually suspect that the disciples were not lying. I think lying is the least likely of the naturalistic explanations of the reports of the resurrection. Nonetheless, I see no reason to believe that any supernatural explanation is more probable than the idea that they were lying.